Right, well, the good news is I've been told we can start the thousands, and I mean literally thousands of people are logged onto the webinar because they've heard who is speaking today. My name is Chris Maguire, and this is our latest Rochdale Ambassadors event. We're going to be talking about cybersecurity, effective home working, and communicating with your staff. Before that, however, we're going to be hearing from Paul Dixon and Steve Rumbelow. Paul Dixon's a partner of Molesworth, Brighton Clegg. He's also the chair of This Is Rochdale. I should just mention, as always, that his two daughters and his wife all work for the NHS, doing a fantastic job as well. He's going to give us an update on furloughing. Then he's going to hand over to Steve Rumbelow, who's been given a new rainbow tie by his wife, which he mentioned earlier off air. And he'll be talking about what's happening in Rochdale, etc., etc., etc. So over to Paul. Paul.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a slightly unusual Rochdale Ambassadors event. Hope you'll enjoy what we've got for you this morning. And I hope you like my background. I'll just step out the way. That's the new Rochdale Riverside Shopping Centre. That's the eastern aspect with the sun going down on it one day in January. I looked at Steve Rumbelow's background and thought if he can have a dinosaur, I was going to borrow his shopping centre. In fairness, nobody else is using it at the moment, so I thought I'd make the most of it this morning. But when we come out of this lot, the new shopping centre is going to be excellent. If you've not been to the M&S Food Hall yet, you really must go. It's the only thing that's open, but it's excellent, absolutely excellent. According to the notes I've been given, I've been asked to talk about furlough today, and I was asked to take people through the details of furlough. I suspect everybody is sick and tired of hearing about furlough, reading all the web briefings on it, etc. And I suspect that most businesses who are going to furlough staff already have done so and have experience of the government portal, and many of you are already getting the payments through. So I'm not going to go into the technical details. We'll be here till 6 o'clock tonight if I did that. What I would say is this: we've already published a flyer that's gone out on the wires, offering free advice from our firm, Molesworth, from Cowgills on tax and accountancy, and from Tony Rollins' firm at West Pennine Insurance on insurance aspects. If you have any queries about anything that we can assist you with, we will give all Rochdale businesses free advice to help guide you through these things, and in particular furlough. One or two technical difficulties are being experienced by some businesses with furlough. If you want to give any of us a call, do so, and we'll answer the queries as best we can for you. What I would say is this: furlough we now know has been extended until June. My view is it's likely to be extended again. I cannot see that the government are suddenly going to withdraw it. I would guess that it's going to be extended in one form or another to protect the economy. Think about your strategic approach to furlough. How can you use it to help your employees? How can you do it? How can you use it to perhaps help employees with young families to look after, who perhaps need to have a break to look after them? Can you organise your business in such a way that you can let them go on furlough leave and support them through this crisis? That's all I've got to say about furlough at this stage. If anybody's got any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us directly, Cowgills, or on Insurance Matters, West Pennine Insurance. We've got a great lineup of speakers today. We've got Paul Stobart from Zen Internet, we've got David from Mice and Papers, and we've got Danny from Mid Communications. And they're going to take you through some of the issues for remote working, working at home, cyber security, basically helping you with the new normal. And that's really it from me. Hope you enjoy the rest of this morning's event. And now I'll hand over to Steve Rumbelow.
Thanks very much, Paul. Good morning, everyone. I thought I'd just spend a few minutes talking about what the council's been doing in terms of community response, some of our normal sort of business as usual services, probably touch on social care, business support, and I'll just say a little bit about the exiting the lockdown. I need to start with DIPI, don't I? Because Chris Maguire, we did this last 2 weeks ago, and I chose to do it in front of DIPI and was requested to do so again. It's getting a bit boring now, but DIPI, he never says very much, but he's happy enough. And we are in discussions with the Natural History Museum, positive discussions with a view to keeping him for longer, but that will need to go to their board. So it's probably going to be mid-May by the time we know about that. So on community support, the council very quickly set up 4 community hubs supported by a contact centre. So far, we've delivered 855 emergency food parcels to the most vulnerable households in the borough. We're helping 134 people with home shopping, and we've delivered 394 food parcels on behalf of the government, where for some reason their direct delivery couldn't work on behalf of the resident. We're also making a lot of outbound calls. We made 1,600 outbound calls. One of the first councils to start doing that to shielded households to check that they're okay. And we've just introduced something the leader was very, very keen on. We've introduced special food vouchers that are being sent to the most vulnerable households. Started going out a couple of days ago, and will just before the weekend, and we'll go out the rest of this week. And they've been targeted at the people on free school meals. They're the most vulnerable people. It's a proxy measure really for the most vulnerable people in the borough. In terms of services, our strategy from the start was to try and reduce the impact of social disruption as much as possible. What that meant was trying to make sure that our core services, things like refuse collection, didn't get impacted on by COVID-19. And our refuse collection staff have been terrific. You might have seen them on BBC's Big Night performing very, very well. I think some of the bin top banging was a bit out of time, but other than that, they did Peter Kay's special walk, a great service. We've been doing all the normal things. We've been filling potholes, doing the street scene services, still trying to keep on top of the parks. In terms of social care, clearly been a massive focus on that. We've been in daily contact with all the care homes in the borough. We've had a special infection control specialist service who've been visiting care homes to advise on how they might deal with any infection control issues that they had. We've been very much engaged in making sure that they had all the PPE they needed. That's been something that's been done across Greater Manchester. And because of the action in Greater Manchester, we've managed to make sure that none of our care homes ran short of PPE. Without direct action, just relying on government deliveries, that would not have happened. We've also set up a local testing centre because getting access to the testing centre at the airport was obviously very difficult for care home staff who perhaps didn't have cars, and that was the only way to access it. That's been working very well. And we've been working very hard to make sure that we got hospital discharges right and we got people out of hospital quickly to ensure that we did relieve the pressure on the NHS and there was always capacity in our hospital beds. We've been the best performing authority in Greater Manchester in terms of hospital discharges. And in terms of money, we've been making sure that we helped with the cash flow difficulties that individual carers and care homes were having by advance payments. At the moment, some care homes still have infection within them and their doors are closed, but we are starting to see the number of care homes that are impacted in that way reducing and more beds becoming available. On business support, we are obviously looking at the new bounce back loans. I think the Chancellor stole Rochdale language there because I seem to remember that I was talking about a bounce back the last time we had one of these sessions. But we are looking at how we can make those loans useful to local businesses. It's up to £50,000, 25% of the in-year turnover. And they're saying it'll be a very straightforward process. They start on Monday the 4th, next Monday. In terms of business support grants, we've got almost £36 million out of the door. That's supporting 3,227 businesses. That's 78% of the money that we were allocated, which puts us, I think, second in Greater Manchester in terms of performance and very high on the national league table of getting money out to support businesses. We've also put a proposition back to government about how we might be able to support small businesses in multi-let properties who are not at the moment eligible. And we're suggesting that some of the money that we have to support businesses, which will not all get spent, we're very clear about that, could be used to support those businesses in that situation. as Paul said, I think furlough, the concern is that the cliff edge that's there at the moment. I think Paul's right. There will probably be some extension of that as part of easing lockdown. But that will probably be for a smaller number of businesses, I would suggest. It will be businesses that are perhaps not relieved as quickly. And then the other thing just generally is cash flow for businesses is still a massive, massive concern. Not all businesses have been impacted negatively. We have seen some local businesses that have taken advantage of some of the opportunities. So Crystal Doors and the Vita Group have actually been engaged in making equipment for the Nightingale Hospital in Manchester. Hanson Springs started very early on making parts for ventilators. WCCTV, who make body-worn cameras, are clearly in demand at the moment, so they've taken advantage of that. We've had some businesses supplying PPE, making metal, for example, have been doing that. What we've also tried to focus on is some business as usual. We've launched our growth plan already. In the last week or so, we've launched the rail corridor strategy, which is about delivering 7,000 new homes and 250,000 square metres of employment space along the Calder Valley rail line, focusing on our 5 railway stations through the borough. We've also seen some interesting activity in the property market. We've seen some deals go down, but we've seen interest on Kingsway, for example, in K216, the big 216,000 square foot unit next to the M62. So whilst some deals have gone, deals that we've got interest from 3 businesses that are looking at that because of the need for additional space to ensure they can operate within the parameters of social distancing. And we've seen smaller units. We've seen 3 deals get done that are for businesses that anticipate needing extra space as we emerge from the lockdown. But we've seen 2 or 3 deals that have gone down as a result of what's been happening to those businesses during lockdown. Paul's already mentioned Rochdale Riverside 1. Rochdale Riverside 2, the phase 2 of that, will be on site soon. The site should be hoarded off shortly, and enabling groundworks will be started over the summer. And that's really important to keep that kind of development going. I just wanted to say a little bit about emerging from the lockdown. I think the first thing to say is to remind us where we are at the moment. We are still very much in outbreak management, and that means that our priority, number 1 priority, is to prevent the spread of infection. And second to that is prevent deaths, shielding those that are most vulnerable and making sure that we can treat the people that get infected. And then third is to maintain the fabric of normal life and reduce social disruption as much as possible and to reduce the economic impact. But the important thing at the moment is we are still in the phase of managing this outbreak where the absolute priority is prevention of infection. And the other 2 things come only after we've focused on that. Government mantra has been to follow the science, to follow the epidemiology. This has to change, quite frankly. We need a plan. We need a phased plan to guide us out of the lockdown. And that won't be about following the science of epidemiology. It can't be. It will be about balancing the science around epidemiology with the science around economics. And I say science in both those terms because epidemiology has a lot of assumptions built within it, as does the economics of the situation. And it's got to be balancing those 2 things, and both have assumptions, and making sure that we're making a good judgment call about those 2 things getting balanced off. That doesn't mean that we don't focus on the reproductive rate, so-called R value. That's about how quickly the virus gets transmitted. That's still going to be crucial. We've still got to keep that R value under 1. But it does mean that we've got to shift our focus and look slightly broader than that. What we should all be doing is planning for a different kind of workplace, a much lower density working environment, with different arrangements for personal and institutional hygiene. And that's really important, and we should all be thinking about that now. I would encourage everyone to be thinking about planning for that now. But the bottom line is the release of lockdown will not be about science, it will be about judgment. Thanks, everyone.
No, thanks, excellent, and thanks very much for all your work and efforts at the moment in Rochdale. You hear so many negative stories out there, but so many positive stories in Rochdale at the moment. But obviously, the hard work's just begun. I'd like to introduce our speakers. We've got Dave Brereton, MD of IT company Mice and Pages, who's got his smartest outfit on today. We've got Danny Simpson, MD at Mid Communications, who we know earlier was eating an apple, and Paul Stobar, CEO of Zen Internet. I'm going to start with Dave, if I may, MD of IT company Mice and Pages. You've been around a long time, I think about 21 years actually, Dave. Just tell us, for those people who don't know, what you do exactly and who you work with.
Yeah, morning, Chris. We're an IT support company specialising in looking after small businesses, family firms, owner-managed businesses, really. SMEs, I think is the term. Mainly around the Northwest, around the M60. Probably getting on for about 200 different organisations. And we are there, if you like, outsourced IT. It's quite difficult for small companies to afford somebody internal to look after everything. So often you go to a company like ours.
And how many of the companies you work with will be Rochdale businesses, Dave?
A good proportion. In fact, at the back end of last year, we took on a new company, I won't mention them, but based in Rochdale, just off Yorkshire Street. And I think the kind of game changer or the thing that made the deal get signed was we knew at least 7 of the people that they work with in the town. So it's kind of a bit of a network, a bit like this event. Once you know one person, you know some others, and the word spreads. So we're quite well known in Rochdale.
Okay, you described COVID-19 as a seatbelt moment. The focus obviously has been getting people to work from home rather than getting people to work from home cyber safely. Just tell us what you mean by seatbelt moment.
Yeah, well, I grew up in the 70s, and obviously every car had seatbelts then. Say again, Chris?
The 70s?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought my ears were deceiving me for a second, but...
Yeah, every car had a seatbelt then, but I seem to remember from childhood, not everybody wore one. And quite a lot of people thought, well, it's not for me because I'm not going to go through the windscreen because I'm a safe driver. Then I think in the 80s a law came in, and still not everybody wore one. And I think eventually then we had seatbelts in the back of the car. I think the penny started to drop for people that maybe this was a kind of a serious thing to do. So thinking about cybersecurity and kind of us all running off home to work, 4 weeks ago, the emphasis was really on getting connected, getting working. And maybe we forgot about the seatbelts, and the seatbelts are staying safe and doing that in a controlled way. So I think that's potentially a risk that some companies now might be running. And they need to maybe pause a little and look back at how they got to where they are now and are they doing it safely.
There's a stat when I was doing my research for this, 90% of call outs in relation to cybersecurity involve either remote working or cloud as well. You were involved in a case recently in terms of, it wasn't one of your clients actually, but somebody was tricked into paying a £17,000 invoice just because they basically, breached the cybersecurity. Tell us about that and also the wider problem.
Yeah, we had a call last week where a supplier to a customer of ours was chasing money off a supplier, and a few emails went back and forth, and then eventually the supplier said, well, we paid it last Thursday. And the company said, well, it's not at our bank. And then an email trail came back, and when you start to look at the email trail, thankfully not our customer, but the supplier had their email spoofed, where this conversation was going back and forth. And at some stage, an extra email had appeared, and a request to send monies to a different bank was then made, and that was done. So £17,000 went west. And I presume that the lady who made the payment in this case, which was called Liz, spoke to her and kind of worked out what was happening. She was now working at home. She's looking after a couple of kids. And maybe the normal checks and balances that you'd have done because you'd been sat in the office, you'd have thought, well, I'll just ring them up and check that this is genuine. She just acted on it. So I think that's where the risks now are. We're doing things at home that we'd normally do in an office environment, and the rooms that we're sat in and the people were either screaming that we are at home. There's plenty of distractions, and maybe we're not just taking that extra 30 seconds to check that the link that we're clicking on or the email that we're replying to is something that's actually genuine.
we've got nearly 100 people watching this, and the great thing about technology is the 100 people watching this webinar will be sick of seeing our faces. So in a second, on a count of 3, we're going to flip the screen so we can see what everyone's wearing at home. No, I'm only joking. There'll be people there who've just dropped their Cocoa Pops, but they're probably wearing their slippers. The point you were making, though, the point you were making was that people are at home, they might have a cat on the knee, and they're working from home, and they weren't necessarily geared to work from home, were they? You know,
Yeah.
and their mindset maybe is still in a home mode.
Yeah, and they might also be working on a machine that's at home that's not actually a work machine that they've quickly been set up on, and it's also the machine that the teenage son, when he's up in the middle of the night, uses for gaming. So there might also be some other security compromises there. So there's lots of distractions, and I think we need a process, and maybe Danny's going to come on to this later, for making sure that when you're doing your work stuff, you're actually concentrating on doing that.
Give us some top tips about working from home. I mean, I did a piece, I wrote an article recently, actually. The first thing to do, apt in the current circumstances, is to get antivirus protection on your computer.
Yeah, I think there's. We've always said as a company, there's 4 key building blocks to securing your environment, as it were. And we all know about antivirus. Antivirus was the first thing that came. First came the viruses, then came antivirus. And it's a program that sits on your machine. Every time you open a file or run something, it checks that that's genuine, and it keeps you safe. But that's only one part of the picture. There's 3 other big building blocks really that need to go with that. Obviously, the internet has come and grown. So whilst we're surfing online, we need to make sure that if we're clicking on any links, we're going to somewhere genuine. So really, you should have some web filtering in place, and most companies do, so that you can stop you going to certain sites, certain malicious sites, and reduce the risk there. Likewise, we're all on email. Email filtering should be a thing that's standard. You want to filter out any emails that have got viruses, and again, filter out anything from any known senders that's likely to lead you to a ransomware attack. So if you do those 3 things, the 4th thing you need to do is a little bit different, but keep your devices up to date. So when that annoying box comes up, and it happened on this machine that I'm using right now, last night, I've now got a new version of Windows 10. Don't keep cancelling it, keep doing it, keep your programs up to date, because if everything else stops working, all your other protections stop working, and you've got a system that's banged up to date, then a virus can't attack the hole in the system if you've already patched the hole in the system. So you've got to do those 4 things together. And if you do those are kind of the basics, then that only leaves you with generally the person sat in front of the PC and what you do about them. And mainly that's training, awareness, and just holding people's hands and showing them how to use things properly.
Paul Dixon mentioned earlier about furloughing, just to say that a number of messages on WhatsApp, a number of the companies in Rochdale have had their first furloughing payments. When we talk about like phishing emails, these are the things that let you through the door, if you like. What are the red flags that people should be aware of? Because if they don't pick them up, they could get a ransomware demand.
Well, if you're looking at an email and it's from any organisation, government-backed organisation, that is offering to basically give you money back, that's generally the first one. But you'd be surprised still how many people will click on a link because HMRC have written to them. HMRC are doing something wonderful now. They're actually pushing some money back through the furlough scheme. But as far as I can remember, that's the first time they ever get in contact with you to give you money. Normally, it's just the other way around. They'll only ask for money. So there's lots of people who are... DVLA, there was a good example a couple of years ago where there was a big phishing email campaign that was based around DVLA. So treat anything you get that you're not expecting to get with caution. I think that's the first thing.
This time, actually, probably about 18 months ago, was it 2 years? It was May, I think, year before last. Lots of talk about GDPR. And obviously the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, come out. What's the view with the ICO? Are they recognising the fact that we live in difficult times at the moment?
Very, very much so. And on the back of this, Alison's going to send out a little PDF with some links. And there's actually a link on there to what their stance is. And I think they use the word pragmatic. And they're recognising that very quickly we're all having to adapt, get into new working practices, new situations, and maybe some of the things and the controls that we had when we were in an office that was easy to manage have had to be relaxed. So they've kind of taken a view that, you know, we'll adapt to how we are now, and I can't see there being any actions taken that are going to be precisely because people have gone home. There's got to be some leniency there. There's got to be. We're in a changing world.
We hear a lot about cloud. Are you less secure if your IT is stored in the cloud?
Well, I think when some of the early cloud solutions came along, we saw that, a barrier to adoption was the amount of security that people had to go through to get onto that service. So there were then some high-profile cases where some services have had emails and user details stolen. So the whole thing has been ramped up now. So there's a lot of people that have an Apple device or an Android device. So Google and Apple now, by default, use something called two-factor authentication. So yesterday I was working with a client who needed to set up a new iPad device, and I couldn't do it without him because every time we were logging onto the website was sending his phone the digit code that he had to enter. So cloud has tightened itself up a lot now, and the ways in which that authentication, that two-factor authentication is done, is a lot more secure.
This is another message, and just to remind people, they can actually ask questions at the bottom if they want. Just another email from the company to say that they submitted their furloughing application on Friday, and it's been paid. Just to give you an idea in terms of how quickly some of these payments are happening. Final question for you, David, is that the genie's out of the bottle, isn't it, with home working? People have got used to home working. When, and pray to God it's soon, when we get through COVID-19 and we return to some sort of new normal, a lot of people are still going to work from home. So the onus is on improving and raising the bar in terms of your cybersecurity.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I'm sat today in our office, which normally has a good 10 people around the help desk. It's empty. I have stood here before and thought, right, when we're going to need some more space in another 6 months, what do we do? I'm now stood here thinking, we'll never need more space because probably half of my people might end up working at home quite regularly. Because once we get past COVID, we've still got a climate change issue. And I think, looking at the air quality, the roads that are almost empty, there's lots of other benefits to home working. And it works for people and it works for businesses. There are advantages on both sides. My wife works at Salford Council, which is all of 12 miles away from where we live. And she probably spends 10 hours on the M60 every week for 3 days worth of work. She can do most of what she needs to do from home. So we're going to be embracing this going forward. We're going to be moving electrons rather than moving atoms, I think. I think that's how it's going to work.
Okay, thanks very much, Dave. Excellent, as always. Danny Simpson of Mid Communications, the MD of Mid Communications. Danny, for those people who don't know, just tell us what you have for your breakfast. No, just tell us what Mid Communications do.
Mid Communications, good morning everybody, and thanks for having us on. Mid Communications, we're the largest O2 franchise in the Northwest. We've got 17 stores across the Northwest. We've look after 100,000 customers, both consumer and B2B.
And in terms of what you've done as a business, in terms of, you're obviously a retail business, you furloughed most of your staff, haven't you?
Yeah, so most of our teams, obviously we shut our stores on the 23rd of March, and a lot of our obviously the retail estate shut. And I think it was Paul that was talking earlier on about coming up with a good structure. We operated some of our finance team early doors, and then we've just moved through on a bit of a rota system because obviously they only need to be on furlough for 3 weeks and then they can come off. So we operate almost a bit of a rota system with some of the other team, but some of the other team are still working as well. So
I think everyone knows you, Danny. You say that you're the most positive person that they know, or one of the most positive people that they know. And we were talking last week, and I said, "How are you, Danny?" And you said, "Good days, bad days," and that surprised me. How important is it to be honest about the way we feel at the moment in terms of COVID-19 and the lockdown?
Yeah, I think it's always honest to be. It's always good, to be honest. I think some of us have a real problem with. And I think it's really important to be honest. And it's true. When I first started to work from home, I had good days and bad days. I think the first week I really struggled with it. Changing environment. I normally feed off the energy of others. So being confined to being stuck at home. Was a real struggle. So yeah, it was. I was just being honest, and now I'm, able to help other people that struggle putting that struggle. It's hugely important.
When it snowed about 4 years ago, you, as a company, you introduced more home working. To prepare yourself for situations like snowing. You couldn't have predicted COVID-19. How easy have you found it as a company to make the move from working in offices to working from home?
Yeah, really easy. I think about 4 or 5 years ago when we had the big snow hit, I think everybody got snowed in and we were working
I don't know whether or not, but I just lost some of what you said then. For the older viewers, it sounded a bit Norman Collier, who without doubt was a great comedian of our time. But you think it's very easy to fall into the trap, don't you, of never leaving your office? You know, because the point that you made is that people's place of home, where they where they live, that was never designed to be where they work from. So you think you can get trapped into a situation where people go into their office at 8 in the morning, never leave till 6 in the evening, and that's a big mistake.
Yeah, I think putting structure in is really important. I think more so now, certainly after the first week of building that structure. I think it's really important to try and put yourself a space together that's dedicated, similar to what Dave was talking about before. So you do allow yourself that time to be able to work. I think it's incredibly difficult when you've got people that are homeschooling at the present moment with children. And I think as business leaders, it's really important. I think through my career, when I get a chance to go out and speak to people, a lot of people ask me about how do you manage your work-life balance in a scaling business. I've got a new venture, which is how do you manage the home/office environment? And I think what leaders have got to understand is that you've got to be a little bit more supportive around what you expect from your individuals at home. Remember, you're in their environment now. We're invading their space. So if my son walked in now, I wouldn't bother about it, because at the end of the day, I'm invading his space. This is a family home and I'm working in it. Whereas normally our working environments are away from home. So I think it's really important that we're a little bit more courteous, a little bit more supportive, and a little bit more kind and caring to our individuals who are doing a great job for us at home, but just remembering that we're invading their family space.
You said to your wife early doors, because your wife was bringing you tea and coffee and biscuits and cakes and whatever into your office, and you said, no, I'll come out to get stuff. It's a simple thing, because you didn't want to be like, in like a bat cave. You wanted to come out to the family home, because it is a family home at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that's equally important. My wife's an amazing individual. She's my superhero, and I think she consistently always tries to here at 8 o'clock in the morning.
We're going to come back to you in a second. Everyone at the moment is downloading Norman Collier, because I've described his Norman Collier, and people need to see Norman Collier. I mean, he had one routine. He pretended his microphone wasn't working, and I know you're a talented guy and you can do a Norman Collier impression better than anybody else I know. So I'll come back to you in a second. I'm going to come to Paul Stobart, if I may. Paul, I think you're an amazing guy for lots of reasons, actually. You've got two sets of female twins, girl twins, 14-year-old and 15-year-old. How are you finding home working and home teaching?
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for that warm up. It's certainly busy, lots of noise. And the main thing is actually scrabbling for share of Wi-Fi and bandwidth and all of that, which is pretty ironic given I'm chief executive of a business that does broadband for a living. But otherwise, it's fine. I'm very lucky to be married to somebody who's amazing at running the family household and looking after 4 teenage girls who are 15 months apart.
Listen, respect to you. You want to do one of these every morning, you said to me, for about 3 hours. So, I'll take my hat off to you for lots of different reasons, Paul. You've got 600 staff at Zen Internet. It's one of the biggest employers in Rochdale, with 500 plus actually employed in Rochdale. How has COVID-19 impacted you as a business?
Oh, it's had a huge impact. We're very lucky that we have a recurring revenue model. So that means that most of our business is subscription based, and existing customers have been very loyal. Some have, of course, struggled, particularly in the SME community. So we've had to look after them and their interests and be understanding. But the vast majority are, to date, managing to get their way through it. However, from a new business perspective, it's very quiet, particularly in the enterprise and increasingly in the small business space. Everybody understandably is hunkering down, looking after their own requirements, keeping CapEx and investment spends to the minimum, and looking very carefully to the future. And so new business is very slow, except with consumer. Consumers are still buying more and more broadband for obvious reasons. They want to have more capacity at home, and so there is good business in consumer, but everywhere else it's very quiet.
I want to ask you another couple of questions, actually, if I may. I'm going to come back at the end to Danny. Danny just messaged me to say that he's switched his broadband at the moment, so we'll get that sorted.
I trust it's switched to Zen.
Well, absolutely, mates rates. That's what we'll do. Keeping it in Rochdale. You do 2 vlogs. You do 2 vlogs a week on Tuesdays and Fridays to communicate with your staff. And I've looked at the vlogs, and they really are straight from the horse's mouth. You know, you don't mess about. You know, what was the idea behind the vlogs? Why did you decide to do it?
Well, I think we all came to the view that when we started home working from the 23rd of March, so the whole company worked from home from that time, apart from a skeleton staff still looking after the facility and, of course, a team of engineers looking after the data center. But the vast majority of people are now working from home. And I think we felt it was really important to keep communication channels open. And rather than using email, which we felt was a bit faceless and dry, we decided that we would use the medium of vlogs, and so I undertook to do them. So to my surprise, they've worked extremely well. They've landed well. The messaging's been well received. It's in a sense one version of the truth for everybody. So it's not that my executive colleagues are misleading anybody. It's just that if everybody hears the same messaging from the chief executive, then everybody feels more reassured that they've heard it, as you say, from the horse's mouth. And it's one version of the truth. So everybody can gather around that. So some of the vlogs have, as I rabbit on to my screen, have lasted 10 minutes or more, but no one seems to mind. They quite like the break in the day, the reassurance of hearing stories and anecdotes. And I try and keep it humorful as well as fact-based. So it's worked very well, and I'd encourage everybody else to do the same.
I can tell you for a fact, Paul, and I've watched your vlogs and I like them, but nobody's going to tell the CEO, I don't like your vlogs. That's a fact. But one of them's 18 minutes, and one of the things that I like about it is that it's not Zen propaganda, this. I mean, you talk about the impact of furloughing, you talk about some of the cost cutting and the cost savings as a business that you might have to make. You know, you really put the good, the bad and the ugly in, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the previous speakers was talking about the importance of honesty. I think it was Danny, and absolutely right. You know, politicians underestimate the intellect of the electorate at their peril. And I think it's exactly the same for all of us in business. You know, our people know what's going on. Our people are clever enough and understanding enough to realize what's good, what's bad, what's not so good, what needs to be looked out for. So we took the view that we should be absolutely honest, and brutally so, from the outset of this very, very difficult crisis. And I think that's paid off. You know, so, you know, we've chopped and changed. We've made different decisions on different things over the course of the crisis, because we underestimated some things at first, and then we changed our mind and moved on to a different tack. And because we've been honest, and because we've been sharing with our people as we go the difficulties of managing a way through a crisis like this, they've been very understanding and supportive as a result. So the honesty's definitely paid off.
Yeah, and in terms of when I watched the vlogs, I assumed it must be scripted. There must be bits and bobs around it. I mean, I have a script with questions on, even I tend to go off piece far too often. Especially the longer vlogs as well, but none of it's scripted, is it? I mean, you've either got an encyclopedic mind or you just come across as incredibly sincere.
Well, thank you, Chris. I'd like to think it's the latter. No, I mean, I have done vlogs a lot in the past, so I guess I'm used to them. I mean, sure, I write a couple of bullet points to myself to make sure I've got a broad structure of what I want to say, but then just be me, just be authentic. Go for it. If you stumble on your words, it doesn't matter. You can recover, but that makes it all seem natural. If you're reading from a script, I think it tends to veer towards email communication. It tends to veer towards something that just seems a bit more faceless again. So much prefer a ramble, even if it is a ramble. Be authentic, be real, be natural. make mistakes, recover, keep going, but just use the medium to the best of your ability.
Obviously, with emails, you can see what the open rate is. I mean, what sort of traction are your vlogs getting?
So we've got, just as you say, about 590 people in the business. So the first couple of vlogs got 700 reviews, which was a little worrying to start off with until I realized that people were looking at them twice. But we're routinely around the 500 level at the moment. So people do watch them. I do them on Tuesday and a Friday. For example, the last one, which was actually I did it yesterday on Monday, earlier the week on Monday, was to do with the result of a consultation process we've been running around the whole idea of furloughing and salary reductions and so on, which is really difficult stuff. And because the business is in a state where, like many others, we have to prepare for the future and for very, very big unknowns. The consultation period has gone very well. People have been very supportive and understanding. And I took a good 15, 17 minutes of vlog to explain to everybody in quite some detail the outcome of the consultation and what we were proposing to do. And again, a lot of people watch the vlog, lots of feedback, they're happy with it. It's a medium that works in these difficult times.
One of the vlogs that I looked at spoke about your performance as a company. I mean, you're answering 95% of your calls within 45 seconds. In fact, your KPIs seem to be really high. Your customer satisfaction levels are well over 80% as well. Has working from home impacted on your KPIs?
Initially, we did struggle a little bit because we had never worked from home before. So making sure that the phone systems worked. I think Dave was talking about that earlier. The move to working from the home is really tough if you've never done it before, but we settled in pretty quickly. So for those who are interested in these things, our Net Promoter Score actually went up from +70 to +91 at one stage, which is remarkable. And CSAT, customer satisfaction, has routinely been above 90%. So our people have got very used to working from home very quickly, and their managers and team leaders and all the development people, the training people have all rallied around to be able to support. So we've got used to it. I think it's very easy, though, to underestimate the impact. If you're in a call center role at home and you're basically on the phone pretty much all day without a break, that's really tough. I mean, for someone like me, I can get up, I can make myself a cup of tea, I can go and see the family, I can walk in the garden, clear my head, whatever. But for people who are on the phones for hours and hours, that's really hard when there's no community spirit, there's no team feel. So we've had to adapt our working practices and encourage people to take more breaks, more shorter breaks more often in order to keep fresh and to keep invigorated. But we're learning as we go. And so far it's really good. I mean, the technology teams, the engineering teams have found that without local distraction of water cooler gossip and all the rest of it, they're actually able to focus on what they're doing, and we're beating all of our milestones for development of new technologies, which is fantastic to see. So there are silver clouds, silver linings indeed to these clouds.
Just had a question come in. Somebody anonymous, I don't know, maybe they're embarrassed to ask the question, Paul, but they want to know where they can see these vlogs. Is it just an internet thing? Is it just internal, or are they available anywhere else?
There are some on the website, but they're not the employee ones, because we've also been doing vlogs to our customers and partners. So there are 2 or 3 vlogs on the website. So you can, if you really want to, you can see me in action.
Okay. And in the chat, Becky Lee has made the point that staff is just as concerned about business owners. Staff are just as concerned as the business owners as what might happen. By being honest, there are no surprises. Plus, staff have the opportunity to contribute to future developments. It will also reduce some anxieties for people. The one thing worse than communicating bad news is not communicating any news at all. Is that your experience, Paul?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that observation. And what's a really interesting byproduct of this whole experience for me, and a real learning for me, is that the more that I've been honest and the more that I've changed my mind publicly with people, and of course it's not just me, it's my executive colleagues as well, the more understanding and more supportive people are, because they suddenly realize how difficult it is to run a business. and to make decisions in the face of crisis, a crisis the like of which we've never seen, or I've certainly never seen in my career. And I think that makes them more understanding of the job of a chief executive or a managing director or any other kind of executive in a business. So that there have been some side benefits to all of this. But certainly I would totally agree, if you're honest with your people, that's going to serve you well in the future, post-COVID as well as during it.
And you mentioned post-COVID. You don't think, I mean, in terms of, if you went to Zen Internet now, the good news is you get a car parking space because you've got a skeleton staff in there. But post-COVID-19, you think the way you're going to work is going to be completely different. You know, presumably you're having discussions now in terms of the rules around social distancing, what it's going to look like. What do you think it will look like?
Well, obviously very difficult to forecast with any clarity. However, until there's a vaccine, and there's a bit of a jury out on whether a vaccine will work effectively in any event. So this new normal could last a long, long time. But until that time, we're clearly going to have to operate some pretty clear distancing rules within the office environment. And for us, with an open plan site, it's really hard. So inevitably, we're only going to be able to take back in around 40% of our people at any one time. So that means that we will have to have home working and office working flexed and being sensibly organized for some considerable time to come. And we're already planning for that and talking to our people and consulting our people about that. And they're very supportive. Some of them have found that they really enjoy the home working environment and actually would prefer to carry on doing it that way, which is fine by us, actually helps us out of a problem. Others are desperate to get back into the office environment because they really like the buzz and feeding off people. So it's horses for courses, as it were, but life will not be the same for a considerable time, and it's up to us in business to react and adapt accordingly.
Final question before we come back to Norman Collier's grandson. What's your advice to people in the room in terms of communicating with their staff? Because you've been very open and honest as well, and there'll be there's 100 people, you know, watching this conversation today, this webinar. What would your advice be to them from your own experience?
I think that the watchword in terms of communication is, certainly with people en masse in the organization, is honesty, as we've talked about. You know, be authentic. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. I mean, I think that there have been some leaders who have felt that it's important not to share issues and challenges and concerns with their people about COVID and the impact on the business and so on. And the reason was entirely sensible, which is to avoid people getting anxious. But I think that's a mistake. I think that's really the wrong path. You know, people, as I say, they're grown up, they read the news, they listen to what's on the telly, they're worried, and they're more worried if they're not receiving honest, transparent, harsh, brutal messages. So I would urge everybody to adopt complete brutal honesty. Don't hide anything back. You know, share your vulnerabilities, your concerns as much as anything else. Of course, you've got to lead from the front. You've got to be bold and brave and courageous and give people an inspired view of what's going to be at the other end of all this damn thing. And we will get through it. We will survive it. But in the meantime, you know, we've got to be sensible, be practical, be safe, be healthy, look after yourselves, do the right thing. But we're all in this together. All those sorts of messages, driven and coming from a place of authenticity and honesty and transparency, will work.
Thanks very much, Paul. I'm going to come back to Danny. Danny, it dovetails quite neatly into some of the things you're doing in terms of the way you're communicating with your staff. Just in terms of working from home, have you got any particular top tips in terms of dress code? What time do you start your day? How do you know, how important is routine to you?
Yeah, routine structure is really important. And I think Paul's mentioned some really good points there. I think, you know, we send a weekly vlog out to our staff once or twice a week, just internally, participate on that stream, and we also set them different challenges. So whether that's you know, what you're doing if they furloughed at home and stuff. But in terms of structure, I think that's really important. I think, as I said to you before, I think it's important to try and set yourself a bit of an environment up that is classed as office space. You know, let the other people in your household know that is office and working space, and that when mummy or daddy, or mum or daddy, whatever is in that space, then we're working. But from time to time, that's going to get breached, and that comes back to the point before, where I think you've just got to be completely acceptance of disruption is going to happen at some point at home. And I think you've got to make sure that if you've not had that disruption, which sometimes is the knee jerk to go and get a coffee or a water around the house or out for a bit of exercise, that I think you take it upon yourself to disrupt yourself. I think structure is immense. I think that's the break, and it's so easy sometimes to slip into that guilty part of not taking a break.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you one more question, actually. If there's any questions that anyone's got for the panel, please send them into the chat. I've just been messaged one now, actually, so it's not visible on the chat room, which is one people can sort of consider, is that, in terms of, there was a lot of coverage early this week about when we should come out of lockdown, and as a business, how do you cater for that, so that's just one to consider for a second, and what preparations you make for that. So I've just been sent that one, but just in terms of a quick one for you there, Danny, in terms of you furloughed your staff, but you still do social events, don't you? And you make sure you communicate with them and you look after their mental health and well-being as well. How important is that?
Yeah, that's hugely important. I think you've got to remember that everybody's very different. We do different games. So last night I hosted a music quiz with the staff. It was fun. Thursday night we've got another evening on. We've got a pub quiz. Then we've got catchphrase next Tuesday, and we've got a group game of Trivial Pursuit next Thursday. So trying to engage with them with communication around the outside of it, I think is really important. We're quite fortunate.
I think you switched from Virgin to Sky, and you flitted in and out. At least on my screen, anyway. I'm in the deepest part of Chorley as well. But can I just ask a question to the whole panel? I'll start, if I may, with Steve. In terms of, we saw the agenda move on a little bit this week in terms of some high-profile business people spoke about the need to the economic recovery as well, and planning for that as well. What's your take on that, Steve, in terms of, and also I'll be asking the same question to everybody else. What's your take on that? I think you're currently on mute, actually, Steve.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's got to the stage when we've got to be doing that. And the government's own test, if you remember a few weeks back, the government laid down 5 conditions to be met before lockdown restrictions were eased. And that was about making sure the NHS was coping and could cope, and it is doing, so we can tick that one. It focused on a consistent fall in daily death rate. Now, there's a complication around that because they've just brought in the deaths in care homes, but generally speaking, you're starting to see a turn on that curve, so that can probably be ticked very shortly. Infection rate, down to manageable levels. There is clear evidence that infection rate is now going down. And then there's the knotty issue of testing, that they said that they needed to be able to test people. They've clearly ramped up testing. I think the narrative is somewhere ahead of the reality on that, if I'm honest. But they are saying they're going to meet the 100,000 tests by Thursday as forecast. And then the final test they applied to themselves was that there wasn't any risk that we would have a second peak. I don't think anyone can guarantee that. But as I said earlier, the easing the lockdown restrictions has got to be a judgment call. It's not just purely about following a view of epidemiology. And I think we saw yesterday that's full of it's about a view-based science in any event, because you've got Scotland saying wear a mask and you've got England saying don't wear a mask, and that in itself shows that the science is not precise. It's got variability within it.
I mean, Paul Dixon, what's your take when you're speaking to clients as well in terms of, obviously, I'm not sure if you're privy to the higher echelons of the government, but when you're talking about coming out of lockdown as well, and when that might happen and the preparations for it, what are you hearing and what are you telling your clients? And also, how do you prepare for, the new normal?
Certainly, in terms of clients, I've spoken to a number this week who are now beginning to return to work. And these are businesses that were completely shut down. But a number are beginning to return to work, not at the rates that they were working in January, February, first part of March this year, but the return to work is definitely starting. Construction sites are reopening, manufacturing businesses are starting machines again. So people are beginning to return to work. In terms of planning for the future, what I would say is this. I think most of us in the room today are old enough to remember and have worked through the crash of 2008, 2009. To me, what we're experiencing at the moment feels like the first weeks of 2009. January and February 2009 were horrendous after the financial markets had fallen off a cliff in the last quarter of 2008. It's a different cause, but it's a similar feeling. And then we all had to reassess our businesses, and we're now having to reassess them again. I think also something that will come out of this current crisis is that a lot of people who have started working from home will enjoy that environment and will to some extent withdraw from the labour market, whether they retire before they intended to retire or whether they reduce their working hours. So I think in time, there's going to be work for everybody. It's going to be a new normal, which is one of the buzz phrases.
I mean, in terms of David, in terms of your business employs 10, 11 people as well, you were saying that, you can see a situation where half your staff work from the office and half work from home. I mean, have you thought about how your office will look, with social distancing?
Yeah, whilst I've been sat here kind of listening to what people are saying and kind of looking out on the office, looking at the current layout that's in front of me, I'm kind of already saying, well, should we change that around? Should we move that over there? How do we set up for this, whatever this new norm is? What's got to be the regulations and what's going to be the advice for how many people you can have in a space that we've got? But it's not just a challenge for us. Obviously, I think there's a massive opportunity for us. It's quite exciting times, really, because the many different companies that we work with in lots of different sectors have all got that challenge, and technology is going to play a part in solving that problem for them. So I can see this as being a good time for us coming out, but we've also got to look to ourselves and work out how it affects us. We can't just come back here as we were and then try and roll something out to all of our clients to help them work remotely and work in a different way. We've got to do it to ourselves. So we've got to use those technologies. We've got to understand them. We've got to be able to advise correctly to all those different clients that we do have.
So I'm going to come to Danny and finally Paul Stobart last. But I mean, Danny, you're in the difficult position in terms of you're in a retail sector, aren't you? So when it comes to social distancing, you can't stop people coming into your store because you wouldn't want to. Where are you in terms of your preparation for post-COVID?
I think there was a lot of theory in the team last week, and I think, being honest, this week, Monday I went down to the store in Rochdale and we started to take that up so we could understand what it looks like. And I think it's interesting to understand that in our environment, we've got to just not look at staff, we've got to look at customers, so we look at people as a whole. And I think it would be important to have some guidance, because I think at the present moment, we're just working on a 2-metre rule. So from a store that was potentially buzzing, you're probably going to be looking at 8 to 9 people in a site at any one time. That includes staff and customers, to be able to keep the social distancing measures in play. And I think it's going to be really sobering. I think eventually, when we really come out of COVID, I think the retail space and the high street has an opportunity to really buzz again. But I think in this recovery mode, where we start to see restrictions lifting, I think that's going to be a real challenge. And I think retail is going to find that challenge, and it's very sobering when you get into your retail space.
Yeah. The final word to Paul. Thank you for that, Danny. Final word to Paul Stobart is that, in terms of, have you actually thought about, in terms of, like, will visitors be allowed as an internet? In terms of if workmen come in, are you at that level? Are we talking about having, like, yellow boxes and things like that? I mean, what does it look like?
All of the above. And I think everybody's made a lot of really insightful comments on the challenges there will be in the new world. But I think, visitors and everybody else who comes into our own facility are equally alert to the fact that there is a new world. So people will behave in line with sensible social distancing rules and all the rest of it for as long as that needs to be the case. and that could be some considerable time. But certainly from our own perspective, we will be bringing back people into the facility on a staged basis. I mean, the facility, we do have some tenants in our building, and part of the NHS or an affiliate of the NHS is actually located in our building. So they've been there full on throughout this crisis, but observing, of course, social distancing rules. And that's been very important to make sure that it works. We're right in the middle of building our recovery strategy for coming out of this, working out what propositions are going to work for customers in the new world and making sure that we have everything in line to be able to take advantage. But we're going to have to be much more agile, more nimble, more creative and innovative, and able to change our minds very quickly on things in order to take advantage of what opportunities emerge. But we're up for it, and our people are up for it. We look forward to the challenge.
Right, we're up to 9:31. So thanks very much to all our speakers, Steve Rumbler and the fantastic. This thing actually, the dog. We'll find out the name of the dog. We'll try and get them on, and also 100 or so who've watched the webinar. Lisa Alison Salis is behind the scenes. Thanks. Stay safe. Thank you.